This is the Non-Tech Podcast, conversations about education, technology, and culture, with Dr. Doug Reed and Dr. Matt Stranick. Thank you for joining us.
My name is Dr. Doug Reed, and I am located on Abagway, the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
My name is Dr. Matthew Stranick, and I am on Treaty Number 8 territory, the traditional meeting grounds and gathering places of our First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Hey everyone, it's Dr. Matt and Dr. Doug here with you for the latest edition of the Non-Tech Show. Again, you may forgive us for our somewhat erratic production schedule. I am here to tell you that we do have another episode in the can, which is a really fancy media term for saying that we've had it recorded for a while, and danged if it ain't coming out this evening after this year is recorded as well. So it's going to be sort of a two-peat in as much as they'll be coming out at the same time, which is to say tonight. And honestly, even though this episode is fairly different in some cases from the STEM kind of focus that we've been looking at in our dives into disciplinarity and interdisciplinarity and such, I really think that for the standpoint of any educator, particularly in the post-secondary space, today's topic is pretty dang timely. Certainly within my practice, I have to be honest. So very glad to have you here, honestly. Dr. Doug, what's going on? What are you do? How are you doing, and what are we even on about today, my friend?
Well, what we're doing today is we are talking about language and technology, and we're going to end up with AI. We're definitely going to get the AI, but I wanted to go back and take a look at how technology has impacted language.
Dope.
Yeah.
So and so again, the interest in this being what in particular, if I can ask?
Yeah. Okay. There's a two-parter to that. Part one is my conversations with you offline, right? Not offline, yep. Like off recording. So that's
camera, as the expression goes, yeah.
And the other part is it was the anniversary of the car accident where I got rear-ended at a red light.
Oh.
And I was talking to an occupational therapist or a kinesthesiologist, and I said I wanted a further exercise plan. Like I wanted, like they're giving me exercises very specific for my injuries, and they're awesome. I love them to death, and they're really helping. But I know that I'm getting to the point where I'm not going to have them in my life anymore.
Yes,
because insurance is going to stop paying. And then I thought, and somebody had mentioned, oh, why don't you just ask ChatGPT to create a plan and get them to look at it to see if it's okay? And so I did that. And then what I did is I realized, like, ChatGPT pumped me out, like this generative AI pumped me out about 5 pages of a workout plan for somebody my age with my abilities and my injuries and stuff. And I read like the first half page and thought, oh yeah, that's good. And then I'm like, oh no, that's what students are doing when they're doing it. They're looking at the first little bit and then saying, yeah, that's good enough. And I thought, oh, we need to talk about that. We need to have that conversation.
Well, yeah. And the way I've been kind of talking about it, among other ways, just generally going back to the beginning of the term, is there's AI and there's the other AI, right? There's artificial intelligence and there's academic integrity. And you can't really discuss one without discussing the other. So I call it the two AIs kind of chat that I've been having, just kind of putting it out to my students in my classes and teaching practice. Let's just say that I've had pretty significant occasion within the past week and a half, where the full extent of how easy these tools are to use and how readily people have access to them and willingness to use them. I mean, again, I haven't been in a college classroom for about 9.5, almost 10 years prior to my current thing. And boy, oh boy, all the hype, all the concern about AI that I've seen in the discourse and in just, the general kind of dialogue around this stuff, I really have to reconsider my positions on all of it, just kind of given my recent experience. And so I certainly appreciate the opportunity here to kind of go into that a bit, honestly, pal. So really, it's good stuff. And again, somebody who is a English language teacher at the moment with a pretty strong language or technology kind of thing in their background, I just feel like, wow, this is literally probably one of the best topics we could even have for a show. So much appreciation and respect for bringing that one forward here, pal.
Oh, glad to help. What I love about this show, well, I love a bunch of things, but one is we get to talk about whatever we want to talk about, and this is pertinent right this second. So let's talk about it.
100%. And so with that in mind, pal, are we ready to kind of go into our first reference here?
Almost. When I was a K-12 teacher, I had a colleague that had just got their master's degree, and I had my BEd, and we came out of a staff meeting, one of those Wednesday afternoon after the kids have been dismissed staff meetings, and I'm standing in the parking lot, and I'm talking to him saying, I can't believe, and I was vibrating. I was so annoyed at what had happened in this staff meeting. And he just laughed at me. And I'm like, dude, I'm upset. And he's like, I just finished my master's in educational leadership. And the one thing my supervisor told me was, if you want to know if you had a good meeting, look at the staff parking lot after the meeting. If people are out there talking, you didn't have a good meeting. Regardless if you got through your stuff, people are upset. And there was 3 little groups of people around their cars.
Didn't get enough out during the meeting, or something from the meeting stuck in your craw. Yeah, right. I hear you, pal. So that wasn't the same day that your car got rear-ended, was it?
That was what, sorry?
That wasn't the same day that your car got rear-ended, right, in the parking lot.
Oh, no, that was 20-some years ago. This happened.
Different thing. Yeah, fair enough. Just so that being said, again, really with the personal anecdote here, kind of highlighting a level of concern, and I think you brought something to the foreground here, as much as individual teachers can really only achieve so much in terms of bringing things forward. And so this is something where entire departments and really entire institutions need to be on the same page. And this is something where, in my case, if I was not in concert with my chair, for instance, on bringing forward academic misconduct meetings as a result of the use of AI, if he and I just had a different viewpoint on what this stuff even was, that would be a learning moment for me, for sure. And it would also be something where, okay, there's only limited, interest or support in looking into this. That could be a challenge. So for me, the fact that the chair, a colleague who is at my level but is actually a leader in my department, the fact that they are pursuing this stuff with a level of interest gives me the permission to kind of bring it up as a teaching point. It kind of gives me permission to say, okay, this is something that isn't just going to affect you in my class. This is something that's going to affect you across your studies. And that's because the leadership team is providing support for bringing this discourse or dialogue further. If it were something where the immediate leadership group really did not want to look into this stuff or really did not see it as being significant, then that would just be a completely different narrative, right? So I think institutional support has to be there. Leadership support has to be there when you're having these kinds of discussions, because at the end of the day, nobody wants to just be the one teacher kind of banging their head against the wall, and nobody else is even, having a think about it. Nobody's even looking at it. So that's kind of where your anecdote puts me mentally, my friend. And I think that's a really kind of a good way to step into this first reference you have going back to 1978, which was a good year, at least from my standpoint, because that's when I showed up on this planet. So we are going kind of far back, way back machine for this one, my friend.
Yes. Yeah. I was sick this week. I had I got the COVID shot, and it kicked my butt, right? Because everybody's different with them and stuff. So yeah, it kicked my butt. So I found online, the radio show Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy from 1978.
Awesome.
So I kind of laid on the couch and felt sorry for myself and listened to the streaming, because it's all at archive.org, right? They've got a copy of all that. And so I was listening, and I kind of knew the story, right? I'd read some of the books, and I saw a couple of the movies, and so I knew the story-ish. But at the end of the first episode, they do the credits, and it said, made with the assistance of a digital writing system. And I thought, that's interesting. Why did that get added? Why does that matter? Because it wouldn't have been there if somebody didn't think it mattered. So it was very interesting that in 78, in the UK, in the BBC, it mattered enough to add to the credits.
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, paving the way forward, again, in various ways. This is one of those books that I'm almost ashamed that I haven't read it, because it's been kind of thrown to me as like, it's actually really cool since I was like a teenager. I've been hearing this.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it never landed in front of me to the point that I actually was like, okay, I will engage with this. So it's super cool to me that you kind of tapped into radio adaptation for this. And additionally, were you able to find anything out what was meant by that particular notation, my friend? I'm curious.
I think it was a word processor, honestly. I think they used a word processor.
Pre-Microsoft Word, pre-Word Perfect. Like
Corel, whatever.
Corel. I remember using Corel on like a very, very, very early laptop in like 1987 or 1986 when my mom brought the computer home for her work.
Yep.
And it kind of changed my life pretty significantly. So, yeah, there we go. Digitally altered, digitally assisted back in 78. Half century ago.
So about nearly a half century ago, we're talking about it. We're talking about how the digital technology is impacting things. So
totally. That's
just where I wanted to start, because I have a story. I have another story. I'm full of stories tonight. One of my cousins, I have many, many cousins, right? Like I have like 71 first cousins. So
what? Okay.
Yeah. I come from big families.
I guess so.
Yeah, I had 72 when one of them passed away, and it was disappointing and stuff. But one got married, and I had something from my grandparents. I was the oldest grandchild. So I had little things, knickknacks from my grandparents, and my cousin getting married is 20 years younger than me. Didn't have that.
Didn't know the grandparents at all. Really? Yeah.
Had met my grandmother once, I think, maybe twice, but she was little. Like there's pictures, but there's no memories.
She doesn't
right?
remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
I gotcha.
So I had this little thing that my mom gave me because she was the oldest daughter, so she got the oldest daughter type stuff.
Yep.
And so I put a little note in it, and I wrote this little note, this very touching little note that I thought was touching. And I started to handwrite it. And it's like, no, that's wrong. So I scratched it out, and then I started to handwrite it again. And at 6 goes, I gave up. And then I went to the computer and typed the note and edited it and reworked it the way I write now, the way I structure writing. Then I finished, and I was like, okay, that's good. Then I transcribed it and hand wrote it onto the nice little piece of paper and put it in the present.
Oh, dope. Good job.
And
I like taking that extra step.
Yeah, but it was shocking because I used to write with a pen and a pencil on paper. And then it was like, I can't. That's not how my brain is being taught to do things now. That's not how I've engaged with writing and language for the last however many years. And I couldn't go backwards. I couldn't go back.
I think it's really cool though that you took the extra step to write it in hand after you sort of optimized your language flow and structure with the mediation of the electronic tool. That's dope, man. It's that extra step. It's that extra thing that kind of gives it you were aware of how it would come across to the person reading it, and you were absolutely certain that that was going to be a certain kind of experience. So you knew where you needed to get on the map, and not finding yourself on the way there, you made some adjustments to the route, and you arrived at the destination as per a modified plan. To me, that is exactly what literacy even is. And that's a really super helpful illustrative kind of point about maybe where we're kind of at now relative to previous generations, right? That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that, my friend.
Oh, you're welcome. Sorry, you just said something. I had to write it down.
You're making some notes.
I'm making some notes.
I got to tell you, I got a bunch of time, particularly since I've been teaching the novel for a couple of weeks, where I was teaching Slaughterhouse-5, and then I was teaching Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. And so, like, part of my flow for that part of my lesson for those weeks was that I wanted to kind of demonstrate close reading. And so what I wanted to do to demonstrate close reading was, I said, like, for the purpose of this week, you don't even have to have read the entire novel. For the purpose of this week, what I want you to do is even just challenge yourself to sit down with this book for a couple of hours, right? Just give yourself a couple of hours and have a notebook with you, and open up the notebook, and just as you read, just jump into wherever, pick a chapter. I mean, start from the beginning if that's what you need to do, but really just spend a couple of hours going through the book, reading it, and then just writing down everything that comes to mind as you're reading it, right? Just sort of grab those associations, grab those kind of, and so, like, I told them, I'm like, this is literally what I'm doing to prepare for this lecture. I am not reading the entire book. I've read this stuff before, or I know enough about it at my point to be able to say, for this class, I'm just going to become an expert on the first couple of chapters. And so I'm going to read all these notes. I'm going to write down all these notes, and then I'm just going to stand at the front of the class and scroll through the digital version of it on the smartboard and scroll through it, right, magnified. And because this is something where my chair, he observed my class, and he was like, well, I appreciate what you're doing here, but for our course outcomes, what we're really trying to do is have more of a textual analysis kind of approach in the course. And I'm like, no problemo. I am happy to respond to that feedback. So now every class, it's like, I'm going to bring up some of the text, and then I'm going to take my kind of 2 or 3 pages of scribbly notes, and then I'm just going to openly refer to them. I'm going to kind of scroll through the text and then say, right, here's the first couple paragraphs. Here's what I'm noticing about the novel. Here's what I'm noticing about the way that it's written. Here's what I'm noticing about the characters. Here's what I'm noticing about the narrative approach of the author and why that might be the case. And again, just a couple pages of notes, really to kind of annotate my thinking and then speak to those points as we go through the text. So here's what I noticed, midway through the first chapter. Here's what my notes are kind of referring me towards now when I'm looking at it. And then that's kind of a point to stop and ask the students, well, what did you think about this? And in the case where students haven't read it yet, which is honestly most of them, a lot of them. Right. I mean, it is what it is. But I'm like, you don't have to think of this as something where you have to brick out an entire week in your schedule to cover a novel. You can just sort of take it for a couple hours at a time, get your meaning from it, make a record of your meaning by kind of coming up with some notes that make sense to you, and that aspect of turning it into notes by hand. That to me is something that may be somewhat of a dying art form. It may be something of a thing where maybe in K-12, wherever people are coming from, they're getting more of the digital stuff, particularly this generation who grew up with the COVID, right, where they lost a year or a half of a year of their academic thing,
or 3
where
years.
They just had all this digital stuff, all this online stuff that they kind of had to do to get their thing. It's just like, okay, humans have been using a painted stick to render images from their brain on the cave walls since we differentiated ourselves from the other primates, okay? Yeah. So there's a really direct, significant connection to the physical act of having that painted stick in your hand and rendering things, right? You got synapses and cells in your brain that are historically built to generate new thoughts when you do this stuff. So why would you give yourself, why wouldn't you take advantage of that? Why wouldn't you see what goes on with that? So I guess, not to go on such a huge tirade,
no,
your thing here, the writing really landed for me.
I wish I had known that's where we were going to head with your comment, because that's beautiful. Okay. Because I read a couple articles about that about 5 years ago, and of course, I don't have the references memorized or anything, but the people that did the study said they compared people that didn't take notes, people that handwrote notes, and people that typed notes, like on the laptop or whatever. And they said there was a significant difference, a significant statistical difference with the handwritten notes. It engaged different parts of the brain than the typing did or the no notes. And people didn't even have to go back and look at the notes again. It was the act of taking the notes. But I don't remember that reference offhand.
You physically internalized it in a way that digital note-taking, I mean, that's still a new thing. I mean, that's still only within 30 to 35 years of the mainstream of human culture. And 30 to 35 years compared to the hundreds of thousands that humans have been sort of developing towards the literacy skill and the transmission of culture through literacy. I mean, it's less than an eye blink. And so, again, where I see a lot of students potentially kind of getting themselves into problems with academic integrity is just the over-reliance of digital tools, because that's just kind of what they've been given as, this is what work is. Anything you do online for a school is legit, right? And so particularly if maybe, say, they've been in situations where they did use these tools in the past in maybe a K-12 setting or a previous thing, and it didn't get called, right? I'm maybe the first person that's actually used the turnitin.com plugin in Moodle to sort of draw attention to this issue. And the responses I'm getting, it's really, I didn't think I did anything wrong. I copied and pasted my text into an online thing. The online thing changed it, and then I copied and pasted those changes and put it into a document. And that's where they're getting caught up, because the application just leaves digital markers all over the text. It differentiates from non-digitally mediated text, or that is text that's generated strictly from within a word processing application or whatever. So again, it's something where the intention wasn't necessarily to, quote unquote cheat, but it's the case where the language is being modified to an extent that wouldn't have been possible without it. And that aspect of it is concerning. That's the part of it where it does become an academic integrity issue, because without the intervention of the AI app, for instance, the writing would be significantly different than what it is. And so people who are just like, I wanted to make sure that, I got my grammar points. And I'm like, grammar is only worth 1 point out of 5 on this thing. And I would much rather just dock you a mark and say, go to the writing center, than have to have a meeting where suddenly you have something on your academic record about this, right? Again, not to go too far into specifics of what my job consists of, but honestly, I've seen so much of this over the past week that I kind of have to bring it up. So,
and the fifth reference that we're going to talk about today is going to cover. The fifth reference is more of a modern day reference compared to the rest of these. So,
well, I see we got War Shower 2002. So we're going back in the Wayback Machine, only a quarter of a century, and not a half of a century. So.
Yes, so we jumped further ahead, and I just loved, or War Shower wrote this, when they talk about, there's an enthusiasm for technology and language teaching, and it brings us deja vu, because this is what happened 30 years ago, and here's the same pattern happening again. 30 years ago, the technology was audio-based language labs, and they died a horrible death, right? Like, they didn't pan out. And then it was, let's do online stuff with word processors. And now it's 25, 30 years later, and now it's AI. So the cycle continues. Like, we're finding the same cycle every 20 to 30 years of what's going on.
I do agree with that wholeheartedly. Everything you've said lands very much. I guess what I would point to is that with those language labs, I have to assume that the author is referring to non-internet-based technology. I have to assume that the author is referring to things which exist outside the context of a globally integrated and distributed and embedded and ubiquitous internet. And it's only because we are with the internet like ride or die for the rest of our lives, as far as communication goes, that the AI aspect of this, I think, actually does kind of stand out as a singularity, because the AI apps will be with us in some version as long as there's an internet. I mean, it's just, it literally is just an extension of the search function of the internet to a really hyper-specialized level. To me, that's what I see it as from my standpoint. And so that's why the present concern, I would kind of say, well, maybe it is more pertinent for the longer term, only because the mechanism for these things is through an online technology that is with us, infinitum, as opposed to kind of these one-off kind of hardware investments and approaches. We always make so much fun of smart boards. I'm here to tell you, I have smart board for half my classes, and it performs much better as a media browser than just the regular digital projector that I have to deal with in the other rooms. It actually makes the flow of my interactions a lot more seamless with the technology. But, that's neither here nor there. We made a lot of fun. For those who are just checking out for the first time, we use smart boards as a piñata for the things that we find wrong with technology.
Clickers too.
Oh my God, yes. Any kind of response-based system. You could say Kahoot. You could say just, I think they promote interaction. I think you're teaching students how to play with their phone and generate a little bit of dopamine to go with some very low-level income, low-level learning outcomes at a great expense of time and energy relative to the class. But, you know, you do you. It's like, it helps with engagement. Fine. How, like, what level of engagement, though? Because if you're only hitting those lower level, is one of these the correct one, or is it 90% or 95, A, B, C, or D? You're kind of changing the fact that students will be more like, what, receptive to your lesson because you're just kind of giving them a little whiz bang on the technology. I mean, I'd rather it's like unless you're going to have like high level existential kind of questions, right? To be or not to be, there is only one right answer. Right? Like otherwise it's just okay, spending an awful lot of energy to cover a lot of low level stuff at a great expense of time in your delivery schedule. But again, whatever. I mean, things work for people in certain ways, but gosh, we could really go down a rabbit hole on that, my friend.
Well,
right? Give or take.
One last thing Warshower brings up is,
please.
The comment is, language programs are also enchanted by promises of magic through technology. And it was, and I love that line.
Can we make that a category, magic through technology? Can you put that into the metadata for the document for when I put this up on WordPress? That is just awesome. Magic through technology.
Yeah, that is such a nice quote.
That's really good. Yeah.
That should have been my word of the podcast, but I didn't choose that.
I thought that would be a praise of the podcast. So potentially.
Potentially. Now, I want to jump to a Thai reference, a reference from Thailand.
Don't even try the name, man. Don't even try. It's good. The 2015. This looks like a good one, folks.
Yeah, it's a book review about how to teach English with technology, and it was published in a journal called Reflections, and the EFL, like English as Foreign Languages, Highland. And the quote that this author is talking about is, since learning and teaching of English have never lost its high demand, new effective ways to teach English are being explored, and integration of technology in English teaching is one of the most common practices. So 2015, we have Thai researchers saying, yeah, right? People are just throwing technology at it like everything else, and that's going to make it better. That's going to be the ingredient that makes it
it's the
better.
Silver bullet. Yeah, right. You just got to buy a license for a thing, get a couple of your instructors trained up, and watch the engagement and enrollments go up. My goodness. That's really.
Yeah. So I just love finding references from other countries and other cultures.
100%. We embrace the international on this show. I think it's fair to say.
Absolutely. Now here's my question. You talk about you made a comment about the silver bullet.
Yeah.
So silver bullets, traditionally, from what I remember, are used to kill werewolves. So the werewolf in this picture is language learning and the problems with language learning. Is that's the werewolf that we're talking about?
Well, any problem associated with learning, any problem where students are either disengaged, so-called disengaged in the moment. So that sort of becomes a question where, well, maybe just sort of switching up your lecture methods apart from these sort of systems could be potentially helpful, right? Just sort of training people up at a higher level on basic curriculum and pedagogical theory. I mean, just giving people a higher amount of soft skills to kind of facilitate that stuff without a technology intervention per se, which is always a much better approach if you want my real opinion. I mean, get people to a point where they feel comfortable just in what they're doing as teachers. Give them a thing where they actually feel like they have options that they can come up with curricular-wise to address issues, as opposed to just kind of reaching for the lowest fruit on the tree. And this is something where, again, administrators, and I know we use administrators as pinatas quite a lot in the show, but honestly, most of them want to help. Most of them are like, sure, my job and my role is to direct resources to people who need it, because that's a function that needs to happen within an organizational setting. For sure, all of you enlightened administrators who are going out of your way to try new things and to sort of explore options to connect your instructors or staff with resources to reach the students. We appreciate you, and we think you're doing, the Lord's gosh darn work in the education field. But again, the tendency becomes to solve complex problems with simple solutions. And if you're dealing with complex issues regarding engagement, learning, and ultimately like student retention and recruitment, because that is really, at the end of the day, what institutions use as markers of success that I've experienced. Butts in chairs, full-time enrollments, digital or in person. That's what makes the wheel go. That's what makes the world go round in our world. And what happens is that if retention and recruitment are up and you're hitting those markers that you want for your institution, then just keep on with what you have, right? We don't need another piece of kit. We don't need any other thing. But in cases where the institution is trying to solve these issues, right? So why aren't students signing up for this program? Why aren't they getting the best outcomes in this class? Well, it can't be the teacher. It can't be. So let's just throw a piece of technology at it. Let's just take a plugin or an app or a learning management system or whatever, and just kind of throw it at instructors with not that much training, with just obtain the license, obtain the institutional license, get the approvals that are necessary, and introduce this kit because we have the budgetary resources for it, without really looking at how effective the thing is for learning, without looking at necessarily how effective it is for learning in similar circumstances, right? In contextually similar settings. And so this all speaks to stuff that we've been kind of covering since the show started.
Yeah.
And so when I say a silver bullet, it's just really, that's kind of a shorthand kind of jargon for we're trying to solve really complex werewolf-like wicked problems, to use a term from the business literature, wicked problems, with really just here's an app. Here's an app that will address certain technical elements of your thing, but if people don't know how to use it effectively, or people don't know why they're using it, or people just aren't getting the support to even train themselves on it, so they put it aside, all of that stuff not only makes a bad problem worse, it can actually, maybe you're shooting your silver bullet and you miss the werewolf, and maybe you get eaten by the werewolf because you've spent all this time trying to get these fancy silver bullets, and you've lost your ability to just straight up decapitate, harm, or otherwise maim through other methods, right? Boy, oh boy, a lot of unpacking there to get through one metaphor, my friend.
So what I'm hearing is any problem with education is the werewolf, and technology is the silver bullet. That's, like, you were very eloquent, and I'm putting words in your mouth now, but I'm just in a good mood. So
I took the long way to get to this straightforward. Yes, that's what happened.
And
what can I say?
And part of this goes back, like part of that first article, the second article, the Warshauer article, says, oh yeah, every 20, 30 years, this is what's going on. That article we've talked about years ago, the chalk and slate article from 1901 that I found, right, is don't use chalk and slate, use paper. And then it took like 17 to 18 years before they said, there's no more chalk and slate, you must use paper. And then 20 years later is, here's what radio is going to do. 20, 30 years later, here's what TV is going to do. And then it's movies, and then it's computers, and then it's the internet. And so the pattern keeps repeating, and I'm just going to keep banging on that point to say we're just going through it again. AI is just the latest one. This is the one we'll talk about in 10 years, about how we survived and how things have changed. But this is the latest technology.
I've said, and apparently, like, just some people that I deal with don't handle nuance very well. But I mean, I've gone up in front of classes and said, there's actually a lot of really for using generative AI that could be helpful in an academic setting. Like, for instance, these images that I throw in the background of my videos sometimes, just the image generation aspect of itself. Prompt engineering, right? You'd start looking at what makes a good, you start looking at your outputs through an AI app, and you start going, okay, it's like what you did with our logo, right? A couple of years ago. You just kind of kept tweaking versions of the textual input into the app, and you just kept trying to see what kind of iterations came out of it. And then if you're really smart, you have the ability to start comparing the iterations and verbalizing or writing how some of them are preferable to others and how some of them are problematic, and kind of going at it with a critical mindset. I've also said you could use ChatGPT to kind of spit out a mini customized Wikipedia article, which is good for general knowledge for getting you started on some research. But then you actually go and you look at the sources and you do your own writing. You don't ask ChatGPT to write the assignment for you. That's the point where you're stepping into problematic territory pretty significantly. So
I wanted to come back to that point in 2 articles.
Please. Yep, excellent. So where are we going to now?
Right on. We're going to go to Chun Kern Smith, 2016, Technology and Language Use. And I cheated. I've double dipped here. There's not, normally I have like one passage that I like. And they talk about how language and technology have been deeply intertwined for at least 5,000 years since the invention of writing. And it makes language visible and preservable, which is not something I really thought about. But yeah, I read a lot. So, but yeah, there it is.
Makes sense.
And it enables people to communicate across distance and across time in a way that just oral speech that wasn't recorded couldn't. So the technology absolutely impacted it. And I just love the concept of how the technology has changed language and changed writing.
Very much so.
And I
love that you got a Nietzsche quote buried into it. Our writing instruments contribute to our thoughts. I love Nietzsche. Okay.
Yeah.
I haven't read Nietzsche since I was in my 20s, but when I was doing like a minor in philosophy in my undergrad degree, he's one of those dudes who I would just pick him up recreationally, quote unquote recreationally, and just really even though I knew I didn't understand a bunch of it, I still was compelled by it. And so when I see this quote here, our writing instruments contribute to our thoughts, A, that's friggin' brilliant. B, that is just so friggin' Nietzsche to the nth degree. And then C, it also kind of reminds me of another quote, which is popularly attributed to Nietzsche. When you look into the abyss looks back into you. So be careful.
Yes.
And that is entirely what I have tended to experience these past couple of weeks with the AI and related. Like, just be careful when you spend too much time in front of your screen that the screen isn't making, like the algorithm, right? The algorithm. People think that it's just this sort of benign thing that shows pop-up ads based on our search history. Boy, oh boy, there's so much more to it than that. It's like it knows where your phone is, it knows who you're hanging out with, it knows when you're hanging out with them. Anytime you have an internet-enabled thing or sign into a device somewhere other than where you normally are, I mean, you're being followed in terms of location, in terms of your time, and the data record sort of backs up your personalized experience through the internet is catching all that, right? And so it's not just a matter of showing you specialized pop-up ads. It's a matter of actually showing you certain kinds of results when you do search. It's a matter of what you're going to see and what you're not going to see. And so there has been some discourse in the academic literature about how persons who are Black, persons who are like non-CIS white people, sometimes they're at a deficiency in like job search, like in Indeed.com and the like, because the algorithm knows about your profile. The algorithm knows, what you're putting into your thing, and they're just going to include or significantly exclude certain opportunities based on that profile that's following you around everywhere you go, across all the platforms, across all the programs. Why do I see Facebook ads for stuff that I searched for in Google? Well, it's because you're using a browser and you've checked a little box when you signed up for it that you don't even look at or didn't even read, saying that they had permission for this stuff. Anyway, bro, could go on, but boy, oh boy, I do love some sort of ET, that's for sure.
Yes, and I love Chun et al.'s comments about how language and technology are intertwined
100%.
and how technology impacts language. And
yes,
this generative AI is the next step. And part of the reason it's the next step is because the user interface is so frictionless.
That's absolutely so. That's a good term, frictionless. That's a very, very good way of looking at it. I just literally before the show, I do my routine, right? I go, okay, Gemini AI app, I need a background image. I didn't go with it this time. This is from a rock album, which goes with the title for the show. But nevertheless, and again, I've modeled all this stuff. I've gone up in class, and so when it reached the point where like people are like, you said it was okay to use AI, and I'm like, I have to do a video now. I have to do an 18-minute video and put it to all my classes where I am going on record for my own. I got kids in BC whose dad who need their dad to have a job, right? I do not want it known in the hallways of my institution or whatever that I'm the guy who said AI is cool. It's okay to use it for your academic work, which I did say that. I did say that there's some cool creative potential. At no point whatsoever did I say you can use this thing to actually write down your thoughts that are not yours. Like, it's just, so I literally, it's like 18 minutes of, okay, here's where we are. Here's where I need to say specifically and directly. At no point in person or at no point in any kind of context whatsoever have I said that having an application of any kind do your assignments for you. At no point have I ever said that is acceptable. And again, just that isn't even a case where it's like my students need to know this. I'm like, my employer needs to know this because, again, I'm bringing forward literally dozens in the multiple of dozens of academic misconduct cases for this stuff. And it's like, I need the people to know that I am not given free rein on this. So all I can say is to any teacher who thinks that this stuff is benign, that thinks this stuff is like ambivalent somehow, you really have to be clear in your messaging out of the gate. And it's something where you have to just be consistent about it. And so I know for sure my classes next term, I'm going to be spending a good half hour in that first week just beating that particular point into the ground verbally and with multimedia support. And so that's where I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the opportunity to realize the extent that this stuff is prevalent. I definitely on the show, and I'm sorry for the kind of long-winded thing here, Doug, but I feel it's like, it's just like I was definitely earlier in the show at a certain point, going back to when we first started talking about the AI thing, however long ago that even was, probably since the show started. I was like, well, it seems kind of blown out of proportion. It seems like kind of a tempest in a teacup. It seems like something where if you know what you're doing, you can sort of differentiate, and it's not going to be an issue. That's all fine and well for people like middle age and our sort of general cohort. But if you look into the younger people, I'm sorry, I was off base. I have to admit, this stuff isn't threatening in and of itself, but the lack of knowledge about it is threatening. And that's where you have to work it within your permit as an educator to really drive it home about the hows and the whys and the whats and the whens for this stuff, among others, right?
So 2 points. Point one is we first recorded an AI in education episode 22 months ago. So maybe 23 months ago, but it was 22 months ago. I'm pretty sure it was like episode 9 or 10 or 11 or something. Like it was very early on. The second point is what you just described encompasses the final article that I found, Morehouse, Wong, and Lee, Teaching with Technology in the Post-Pandemic Digital Age, Technological Normalization and AI-Induced Disruptions. You just summarized, like everything you just presented, they published last year. They talk about the pedagogy and how the educators are going to have to adapt, and they need to capitalize on the affordances of AI tools, which you've mentioned, but they need to be critically aware of the drawbacks and limitations. And the most important thing that I read here that you just said is educators need to know that it's a tool to support learning rather than a tool to complete assessed assignment tasks.
100%.
And that's the
Couldn't
divide. So that's the communication point that you just summarized next semester. Next semester, we're doing this. There's a huge difference between somebody's going to help and you're getting marked on just on the help that they provided.
Well, what's particularly vexing here, and thank you for that. That looks like an awesome reference, and certainly I want to go to Rizu Rusmianto et al. 2023, because I don't want to leave that one out in our discussion here. But this is my first semester back after X amount of years. And so for me, I just have seen this whole first term as kind of just trying things out, figuring out what works, figuring out what doesn't, kind of a dry run for almost what I want the rest of my time there to be. I'm just sort of figuring things out in terms of my approach, in terms of my curricular thing, in terms of my, classroom stuff. And most of it's going tickety boo. Most of it's really lit. Most of it's really, I'm positive that I'm doing everything I can to kind of optimize learning. But I just keep thinking there's about 5, 6, 12 different things I'm going to do differently next time, given what I know now about the setting, the context of these students. And again, the AI stuff, the academic integrity stuff, and the artificial intelligence stuff, I wouldn't have anticipated it to be so pressing. And yet here we are. Because the place I work for has like this mandatory module for all students, this mandatory online training about, as I understand, AI, but either it's not being reinforced in other areas, or students are just kind of selectively choosing to ignore or compartmentalize that training. And so hence a lot of problems, to the effect of about 30% of my cohort seems to have these issues. So again, appreciate what we've had a chance to talk about. I'm looking at this and I'm like, we've been at this for almost 55 minutes here, my friend. So what else do we got in terms of these references that we want to speak to before kind of dialing our way out of the show, my friend?
Thank you for, when I was going through, I actually missed a Rusamati, Haradi, Fitteroni, Tais, Rafi, and Sari article, and it's about the role of AI in developing language teachers' communication skills. And basically,
Yeah.
I included that because that is such a perfect example of the catch-all ed tech kind of article. It was the, oh yeah,
Nice.
we need further research. We need to figure this out. Oh, we need to figure that out. Oh, we need longitudinal studies. It's like, you can't have longitudinal when something just happened.
That's right.
It takes time to see that. But that was such a catch-all kind of ed tech article. It was such the typical implementation study. Hey, we looked at this, but you got to go look at this other thing, and you got to look at that other thing, and you got to look at this other thing. We really don't know yet, and it just
we did
summarized.
one limited test, and so now all these questions, for sure.
Yeah, and here's the gaps that we found, and it's like, okay, thanks. It's a place to start.
Yeah.
Further investigations required.
And
it's like
small scale studies. They're trying to get published for their
absolutely
academic thing, which is fine.
Yeah.
But this is a case where aggregates of studies tend to be perhaps more helpful than individual studies, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there were some of those out there, but again, there's no space for longitudinal yet. It's too new. So that's why I threw it in to say, please move forward. Keep investigating. If you're listening out there,
don't,
today's answers.
Don't let the momentum die down. Yeah.
Yeah. Because 22 months ago, we were talking about we need to do some research on this. This research needs to happen. And a bunch has happened, but we still don't have the answers yet. And are we kind of heading in the direction? Yeah, but everybody's got the pain point, right? Like you had I watched some of that. I did not watch the entire 18 minutes of your video.
No reason anybody should, except for my students, my friend. I'm just right. Like this. The people in my life the people who I bother on Instagram on the regular with stupid memes and Garfield and rock music. I'm like, I'll throw in something real every so often, just so people don't know are aware that I'm not a complete crackpot. And this was something where I'm like, the people got to know. Whoever the people are outside of my students, the people got to know. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect anybody to watch more than a couple of minutes of it if you're not my students. But I just was like, I have to express this to the widest possible venue that I can, basically.
It took about 30 seconds, and it's like, oh, I got the gist. I know what this is.
Yeah.
I know what this is.
You got the gist. You don't need to hear it. You're somebody who just, I figured educational technology, we're friends in real life, and sometimes I feel like I need to justify certain things that appear in my Facebook feed and Instagram feed. Like, wow, that's morbid. Are you okay? Well, I am, but I got this going on in the background, So again, no, it's like it's a legit video. It's totally. If you ever want to imagine what I'm like in my just straight up, fully professional kind of mode, that's pretty indicative. And I'm happy with that video. Happy as in I'm happy with how I carry myself and all the points that I make. I am unhappy that I had to make the video. Do you know what I mean? Honestly. So again, timely stuff, right? So
I get it.
Yeah.
But this is part of the culture change. This is.
You got to tell them. You got to tell them explicitly, and you got to tell them repeatedly. And if you don't, you're putting them at risk of sort of carrying on, thinking stuff is okay. You're also putting yourself at risk as an educator. If again, that was just what triggered it for me. Was I just had one particular student who just the way they carried themselves caused me to think I need to run these assignments through this Turnitin app. That was literally the way they carried themselves and the way they were presenting themselves to me. It just made me think something is off here. And then when they came up, these assignments had been 100% each of them for likely AI created by the Turnitin app. I'm like, okay, so this student has an issue. And if this student has an issue, the two people that I see him talking to in my class as friends that issue. And I don't necessarily know who else by name ended up getting caught up in the thing, but that was where I decided arbitrarily every single student who submitted this particular assignment, that assignment is going into the thing, and I'm going to just start documenting it. And it became a matter of, like, for me, I was just really concerned. I was like, it's taken me 3 weeks or a month in some cases to get some of these writing assignments back to students. That is not what I want. That's not how I want students to have to get their work. So I'm like, really, how do I thin the pile, right? How do I kind of just get people? Because I knew at that point that some people have been giving me stuff for AI generated assignments, and I've been giving them a grade on it. And those students are just basically banking on the fact that I'm too busy or I don't have a detection tool to notice. And once I realized that I had likely given a bunch of marks to people for stuff that they hadn't written themselves, that's where it really became imperative to me that everybody get looked at for this stuff. And so that going forward, none of this is possible to happen without going through the integrity plugin. Just none of it. None of it. I'm not accepting assignments anymore that don't go through the integrity plugin. And that was significant, but it also added a whole ton of time to my workload. It added a whole ton of time of like going in at 5 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, whatever, before work to just document this stuff in addition to the marking. And so I've had to apologize to a lot of students. I'm like, I'm sorry it's taken you so long to get this thing back. But I basically had to deal with the fact that basically 1/4 or more of everyone that I deal with has this issue. And so you can't like use your kitchen normally when your house is being remodeled. You can't have a shower when you get a new bathroom. You really have to like improvise around the renovations. And I see this as renovations. I'm like, a bunch of you have just missed the point of what this is even about. We have to kind of go back almost to point zero and start over in some cases. And that's really what kind of led me to the present moment where I'm like, I even have to do an 18-minute video on this just because I can't have people thinking, particularly the people who hire me, particularly the people who pay my salary, or are looking at maybe I'm going to extend this guy for a contract or not. I have to be able to look those people in the eye and tell them I'm doing everything I can to enforce these policies that we have at this institution. And it's just really, it becomes a matter of my kids need groceries and sports and a roof in their lives. And if I don't prosecute this stuff, I'm minimizing that. I'm treating that as less seriously than it should. Anything that gets in the way of me putting food in front of my kids is going to get my attention. So, again, that's probably what I'm getting final thoughts. But
I don't see that as prosecuting. I see that as a community and a culture and deciding what is appropriate and what the norms are for behavior. And part of being an educator is caring about the entire student. So
that's right.
It's like, hey, this doesn't fit in our culture. The culture of this classroom, I don't care what town I'm in. I don't care what country I'm in this class, in this community we've created here, that doesn't work. That does not fly. And you're taking the steps to say, okay, and now I know better. So next year, you'll know the changes that you get to make. So,
and in some cases, though, I've had multiple infractions by a single student. In some cases, because I've had to go back after that and just document everything else. And so I've had some students go into these meetings with just what I brought. They could be removed from the institution.
Mm-hmm.
Just what I brought. We're talking 1, 2, 3 strikes in my class alone. And so it becomes a matter of, do we treat these as one incident or do we treat them as separate incidents? Yeah. You're stepping into some pretty significant, morally challenging territory. And that's where having experienced, thoughtful chairs and deans and staff, actually having a strong leadership cohort
Yeah.
That's where it sort of stops being like within my permit as a teacher to kind of notice and document stuff. That's where the leadership kind of takes over. Like, okay, appropriate penalties under the circumstances, right? And
Yeah.
I'm glad that I don't have that decision in my basket right now, because I know I got a lot more professional growth to do before I can really make that. But the fact is that my leadership is there for me and that they support me on this stuff is significant.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It is major. So again, I'm totally getting into final thoughts territory here. I know we're going somewhat long on this episode. So did we have anything else we wanted to get into with those references before getting into visuals here, my friend?
No, I have some pictures. There's not a lot of digital clutter in the pictures that I've shared this week. So if people go to analogue-trope.ca/podcast, you'll find the website. And normally, for any new listeners, I have digital clutter that I've been collecting for 30 years electronically. And I like to share.
Is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So some of these are older and some of them aren't. And I just like to share some of the pictures, and some of them are just to the point. Here's what it is, and we need to make sure that we're aware that there's advantages and disadvantages with using AI in ed, right? We got to look at both sides. It can't all just be rose-colored glasses. But there was a couple of big warning signs. There's a little picture that I put in there, like 2 stick figures that I found. And it's a little person with a happy face saying, "Hey, I'm a technical writer." And then right next to it is a little AI chatbot. "Yeah, me too." It's like, that scares me. We need to be aware of what's going on. We need to pay attention.
100%. Well, and you got the Kermit the Frog having a sip of tea with some pertinent thoughts. But I like your the pillow thoughts text here, the pillow thoughts 2 or whatever, that image from a book.
You can't skip chapters.
Can't skip
That's not
chapters.
how life
That's
works.
not how it works.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can dig that, particularly given our topic here, language and AI, or technology, as the case may be. That's dope, man.
It felt like it was literature and emotional and poetic, and I'm not the most poetic person in my head. I don't think I am. So when I see something like that speaks to me, I want to share that. And it's
100%.
Part of it was with these students that are just, they don't care about whatever. It's like, let's use the ChatGPT and let's get through and then BS our way through the appeals process or whatever it happens to be. It's like, you're missing out. We're doing this to help you live your life. You are trying to skip chapters. This stuff matters. A whole pile of people says this stuff matters. And if you do it and actually engage with it and embrace it, you might start to understand why it matters. Let us help you.
A well-rounded education is invaluable in ways that you don't even know, because you're not in the situations yet where you're going to see its benefit. And it's not even until you're some years out from that experience where you realize you're using analytical skills and literacy skills and numeracy and logical thinking and the ability to formulate an argument, until you're in a situation where you've had to do that stuff in a way that materially and significantly changes your life. You're just going to maybe think, well, I'm just here to get the content. Well, I mean, the value of it will play out, whether you're cognizant of that or not, right? So
for me, an example of what you just said, and I know we're over, but have you ever seen any of these memes on social media where it's like somebody at the pearly gates has passed away? "Hey, Mrs. So-and-so, I never used algebra." And it's like, bug off. You're not supposed to be finding X. It's about you learning how to think and problem solve and examine and explore. It's not about finding X or what's the blah, blah of Y. That's not what algebra's for. It's about helping you think. And you obviously failed, because if you're holding that grudge till your deathbed, right, you missed the point. Anyway, I'll get off my
And probably a
soapbox.
lot of other stuff along the way as well, as the point. Yeah,
Yes,
that's true.
exactly it. Live your life, stop skipping chapters, actually think about it. So I got three more
Awesome.
things.
Sure.
Three more things. Word of the podcast is language, because we mentioned language a bunch. Question of the podcast: how do we use AI to support learning rather than for completing assessments to be marked? And how do we communicate that with students? Because that is a key impact of what's going on right now in a lot of places.
Awesome.
And I have two phrases of the podcast. One is magic through technology, which I really like. And
I'm loving it.
the other one is because I'm just in a good mood. Any problem with education is the werewolf, and technology is the silver bullet. I just love that.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I've just simple problem, complex issue, or sorry, complex issue, simple solution. It's just, it's nice. It makes for like a good hypothetical. It makes for like a good what if or speculative kind of scenario. But anybody who's been on the implementation end of a new technology intervention in a learning environment of any kind is going to tell you that there's no such thing as an easy fix. There's no such thing as a Band-Aid solution, and that there are such a realm of unintended consequences and such a realm of adjustments you have to make across your whole delivery of your thing to accommodate the new intervention. If you just try and throw something in like a Molotov cocktail, you light up the bottle with the rag and throw it at your target. If that's your approach to a very complex scenario, then I mean, it's not gonna work. You have to know that by making an intervention of any kind into your learning thing, all the other stuff needs to be adjusted too. And if you're just trying to fit it in existing without making those adjustments or knowing what adjustments need to be made, then you're going to be in for a problematic implementation, and it's not going to have the desired impact. It's not going to have the desired effect. So for administrators and leaders who bring this stuff forward, you got to have robust support. You got to have robust training. You got to give a period of time for the shit not to work, so you find out how it's going to fit appropriately into your situation. And if you don't have a timeline that accommodates that, if you're not willing to put in those resources, if you're going to come down hard on instructors who use it unsuccessfully or fail to use it, then you are limiting the ability of the intervention to succeed in the first place, right? It's not a matter of the intervention itself is a bad thing, which sometimes it is because of just poor thinking and planning. But again, it's really, you have to give it a proper chance to succeed, because if you don't, then it's going to go down in flames and tears and the students being confused and upset at the end of the day. And that's not where you want to be, for sure. So.
Yep. And thank you for taking the time to record this the day before Remembrance Day, because Remembrance Day matters, and I hope you get a chance to get out to a service tomorrow.
Yeah, me and my new significant other, who I'm living with now, we're going out to attend the services. My gal is a mom to a couple of first responders and has trained first responders throughout her career. So this is certainly significant for us, and looking forward to attending that at 11 a.m. somewhere in Fort Mac. So appreciate the reminder there, pal. And to anybody listening, let's just remember those who have helped to make the place that we live now what it is. And let's take a moment to respect and appreciate that we have the freedoms, including freedom of expression, including freedom of thought, that other places simply don't have. And the moment we take that stuff for granted, we are failing ourselves a bit. So actually remembering those in a very meaningful way who stepped up for us and continue to sort of step up for us, for those who are currently serving, whether, again, military personnel or first responders or whomever. Let's just appreciate that for the significant sacrifice that it is.
Well said.
Awesome. I'm out. How about you, Doug? You got anything else?
Nope. I hope everybody has a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, totally. Appreciate y'all, one and all. Thanks a lot for checking out this show. Bye for now.